For more content and training on telling personal story, go to ramiro.me/show. Story Legacy at ramiro.me, a show for people who want to tell their story, make an impact, and leave a legacy. Personal stories from people just like you who have gone through tough shit and came out with a story to tell. I am Ramiro, creator of Story Legacy, your story guide. And today on the show, we have from Costa Rica, Teresa the grosbois.
Wow, I love that intro. That's the best intro I've ever had. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
great to be here.
Yeah. So Teresa, we're gonna get into it right away. One of the questions I love to ask that really gets into the depth of someone's personal story and who they are at the core is like, what has been one of the biggest challenges you faced and gone through in life?
I think for me, it was when I felt called to really step up and lead the Evolutionary Business Council. Because for those of you who haven't heard of the Evolutionary Business Council, it really is a community of some of the world's top leaders, thought leaders, like people who are really pushing the envelope on the way we live and the way we think in this world. And like any normal human being, the minute we get called to lead, all our self-doubt, all our negative self-talk starts flaring up, and I gotta admit that was like a dark night of the soul for me. It's like, who could ever be big enough, strong enough, clear enough, a good enough leader to lead an organization like this? And I gotta say, that was one of the toughest mental journeys I've ever been through.
Okay, so I'm curious, when did you get that first inspiration that you were called? It was clear to you that you needed to step up and take that leadership role. When was that first one? And how fast or slow were you to embrace and accept that role?
Yeah. The Evolutionary Business Council was created more by intervention than plan. I had actually done a big event in Calgary. I was living in Canada at the time. I'm originally Canadian, even though I live in Costa Rica now. And I had invited a lot of my favorite colleagues to come and speak at the event. A lot of people I masterminded with, Dan Gutierrez was there, who's of course one of the top Latino speakers in the world, and Dr. Shonda Perrin. She's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. So we had some really cool people speaking at this event. And I decided, I'm inviting in all these really awesome people. I'd love to hang out with them after the event. So I booked a condo up in Banff, Canada, which is just a beautiful area of the mountains, very close to Calgary where we were. And the day after the event, we all went up and we're sitting around having tea or wine, beverage of choice. And out of my mouth comes the phrase, someday when I'm influential enough, I would love to create an organization for all the emerging thought leaders to really help us all become really impactful in the world. And to a person, everybody in the room starts laughing. And I'm like looking around, what's going on? I just told you guys my dream and you're all laughing at me. Like, what's happening here? And Danielle Gutierrez looks at me, he says, Teresa, you were on stage 4 hours ago telling people to notice when they're saying, someday I will, and inviting them to make that day today. And then Jennifer Huff, who runs the Vital You, she's also one of the top speakers in North America, looks at me and she says, so when are you going to do that, Teresa? And it was amazing. Like Harrison Klein was in the room, who runs the Masters Gathering. All these beautiful people were there to hold my feet to the fire on who cares whether you feel ready, maybe today's the day. And that was actually the moment the Evolutionary Business Council was born. And in fact, those 6 people that were sitting in the room with me that day became the first board of directors for the Evolutionary Business Council. And we spent that whole weekend sort of dreaming and talking about the possibility of what it could be.
Beautiful. So let me get this straight. When you just said those words out loud, there was no space for you to procrastinate, to put it off, because there was this whole group of people who held you accountable, put your feet to the
Yeah.
fire, using your own words and teachings.
Yeah.
Someday I will. So that you had to, you immediately embraced that, and that's how it started. Wow, that's so funny. Thank you for sharing that. Now, what's from that experience, right? Was it scary? One.
Yes. Absolutely scary. You know, like what you wouldn't know about me if I didn't tell you is I'm not only Canadian, I'm from Northern Canada, right? Like I'm from the Canadian equivalent of the backwoods, right? And my family used to spend all of our summers in a remote backwoods cabin, like no running water, no electricity. We'd go in by boat every year, just in time to see the hatching of the little baby mosquitoes. And that's Canadian humor. um, and so my family was like my whole world, you know, and like it wasn't like there was me and a bunch of friends in my family. No, it was like me and my 8 older brothers and sisters. And I'm not only from a big family, I'm the youngest of the big family, right? And so being accepted and being acknowledged into my family became like so deeply ingrained and deeply important to me, right? And I actually can remember the moment I first created my most significant self-limiting belief, right?
Mm.
One year we were just back from the cabin, and we're standing around in the kitchen of our very small 100-year-old house. And not only are all my siblings there, but all my cousins are there. And the room is just buzzing with excitement because my grandmother's going to take us to the movies, which in my family is a really big deal, right? And I look across the room just in time to see my mother say, Teresa can't go. She's too little.
How old were
And
you?
I was 3 years old.
Wow.
And in that moment of utter devastation, 3-year-old me tells myself I'm too small to play with the big kids. And like every normal human being on this planet, when we have a significant traumatic moment in our childhood and we tell ourselves something to make sense of it, lots of research shows that we do this now. In that moment, that inner dialogue sticks. And as human beings, we always do one of two things when we create a significant limiting belief like that. And usually we create our limiting beliefs when we're first learning language, right? That's something that we've discovered in research. And so for me, I then started spending all of my time desperately trying to prove that it wasn't true, or desperately terrified that it was.
Mm.
And so, you know, go figure that I should eventually grow up to become an internationally renowned expert on influence, because the whole conversation of importance became important to me at the age of 3, you know? So it was fascinating to me in that moment of the EBC getting created. I'm too small to play with the big kids was right there, flaring up full bore. And that was a moment where I really had to learn to master and quiet my own inner child to be able to step forward into it.
Wow, beautiful. Okay, I got chills when you share that. I still feel the chills right now.
Mm.
That was so that was it was scary, and that is one of the reasons why, because of that
Mm.
3-year-old traumatic experience,
Mm.
I'm too small to play with the big kids, right? And
Yeah.
then how did you navigate through that, even though it was scary, right? You mentioned that one of the things you did, you had to quiet the voice of the inner child. But how did you further deal with that despite that scary, uncomfortable situation to keep moving forward and navigate through that and creating it and basically manifesting what you said you wanted to do
Yeah.
someday?
Well, one of the reasons I teach so much inner child work in the work I do around becoming influential is, you know, what we're really finding through research and human development now is good people everywhere have self-limiting beliefs that they've created at the early age, you know, usually when they're first learning to speak, that plague them throughout their lifetime, right? And in fact, and they are most challenged when they feel called to step into leadership. Like nothing will bring up your negative self-beliefs more than stepping into your own dreams. And I don't mean your dreams to have a nicer house or a nicer car. Those are valid dreams, and I'm not dissing those. But most people have some deep-seated dream to really do something that matters in the world. and that's layered on top of all those other dreams, like to have a closely connected family, or and sometimes to do something that matters in the world is just something that really matters to your family, or something that really matters to your community. Sometimes it's a bigger vision than that, but most of us have a deep-seated desire like that. And stepping into that desire is going to flare up all that self-doubt that you created as a child, right? So I really had to go back and do my own exercises. I had to, like, fortunately, I was surrounded by people who teach this stuff, thank God. The funny thing about starting an organization like the Evolutionary Business Council, it in fact was one of the easiest things I could have ever done, because I was surrounded by amazing teachers and mentors who just wouldn't let me fail, who coached me and held the space for me to succeed. So in fact, a lot of what I was terrified of in stepping into it couldn't have been further from the truth, because I had so many amazing people around me.
Oh, beautiful. Wow. So a few things you mentioned, like healing, working with the inner child, holding space. To you and me, those are so natural, and we get what we're talking about, right? So I'd like to get a bit deeper on that. Well, first, before we get into the inner child, holding space, and you mentioned one thing. Luckily, you were surrounded with people, leaders who were teaching that, so that they could coach you, guide you, help you hold that space. Holding space for someone, what does that mean? How would you explain and translate it for someone who has no clue what that means?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful question. My favorite Jennifer Huff quote is, "A friend who's someone who learns the song in your heart and sings it to you even when you've forgotten it."
Mm.
And I think that epitomizes the
Wait,
definition of,
repeat it, please.
yeah,
Repeat it.
a friend is someone who learns the song in your heart and sings it to you even in those moments when you've forgotten it.
Beautiful.
And so to me, that epitomizes the definition of holding space for someone. A lot of us had, especially people in our early lives, or like some of my greatest influences were in fact my parents, my mother especially. Like, because being the youngest of a really big family, my parents were almost 2 generations older than me, right? Like, because my mom was well into her 40s when she had me. And so my mom was a career woman in the early days of when it wasn't fashionable for women to have careers, and she actually married my dad at a pretty late age. And so she really raised us with just a strong belief in us, you know. And she had certain phrases that just really epitomize what it means to hold space. She said, "Never interrupt a child who's succeeding at something you want them to do." She just said, just stand there in belief that they can do it, right? And the other thing she used to say all the time is, "It's a good thing you're so good at doing hard things." And so whenever my daughters now, as a tribute to my mother, because it was such a powerful phrase, whenever I ran up against, "I'm too small to play with the big kids," or "I'm too little," or "This is too big for me. This is too hard. I can't do it." Her continuous response was always, "It's a good thing you're so good at doing hard things, Teresa." And then that would reinforce my belief in myself, right? So to hold space is simply to bear witness to someone else's ability to be full on who they were meant to be, right? And sometimes I think it's just having people standing there in the belief of you is actually, it's one of the most important gifts we can give to others, like gift your belief in others out generously, because that's actually one of the most powerful forces that moves the world.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, few things I love. One, you said your mom. What stuck with you from your mom was good thing. Good. It's a good thing you're good at doing the hard things. And the other one I love especially, never interrupt a child who is succeeding in something that you want to do. Oh, I just want to repeat
Yeah.
that for emphasis. And going back to holding space, how I love that metaphor of what you mentioned of someone who remembers the song in your heart and sings it to you even when you've forgotten it, right? And the other another metaphor is what you just said is when someone really sees when you said when you believe in someone and give that belief generously is one of the biggest things that will change the world, and it's holding space. So it's another way
Mhm.
to see someone for just who they are, but who they truly are and who they truly could be, and seeing them and reminding of that, holding that mirror and reflecting on, so that then that creates the space for them to
Mhm.
step into that leadership role. I love that. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing those perspectives. So now going into now, Kiro, so we talked about here creating space, right? And we create space for what you said to show up in our leadership role, to um, answer the call, our true calling to serve. And one thing you mentioned is one is also important to have to address and heal that inner child. Right now,
Mhm.
okay, healing the inner child. So to you and me, that's our lingo jargon now. How would you explain it to someone who has no idea that they're an adult? They're like inner child. What the fuck is that? How would you explain that? How would you, yeah, explain that to someone who has no clue about the inner child yet?
I love that question. And you know, it's amazing how much research has been coming out on this in the last 30, 40 years now. That's just fascinating looking at how we as human beings operate, right? And really, we're all walking around as a compilation of past experiences and beliefs we've created, right? And and we filter everything through those past experiences and beliefs, right? And the interesting thing that research is really now showing is a lot of our strongest belief systems, a lot of what creates what we might call our personality and the filters through which we make decisions, we make those decisions in the very earliest ages, like when we're first learning to walk and talk and first learning cognitive reasoning. And the whole movement toward consciousness, you may hear this word a lot out there now now coming into TV, coming into popular literature. Consciousness is just about noticing how you think, like noticing your own thoughts, noticing what you tell yourself in those moments when things get hard. Because a lot of what you're telling yourself, you know, I'm too small, I'm too short, I'm too white, I'm too black, I'm not North American, so I can't do that. I'm too Latino. I'm a woman. I'm a man. They'll never accept me. I'm not good at math. I'm not good at speaking in public. Like there's a whole litany of these things that you may have applied to yourself, and everybody's got their own unique set, right? It's not like all of them apply to all people. But when you start noticing those things, that's what we call consciousness. In fact, the whole movement toward like a lot of the top billionaires in the world and a lot of the most successful people in the world are now publicly stating, you want to be successful, you got to meditate. Because meditation helps us quiet our mind to the state where we can start noticing our own thoughts, right? And so inner child work is like just a direct channel to heal those, because when you realize that a lot of those limiting beliefs were created by a really young version of yourself, a 2-year-old version of yourself, right? And that inner child of yours is really just trying to protect you. Like you created all those beliefs to just try and protect you, right? So I like to do exercises with people, and this is where actually I have a convergence between the work I do and the work Jennifer Huff does, because she does exercises on give your ego a new job description. And so we created together give your inner child a new job description, right? Because your inner child is constantly ringing the alarm bell, right? We're too small to play with the big kids. We're not good at speaking in public. You can't do that. You're not athletic enough for that. Like, and that's all coming from that 2-year-old version of yourself. So when you give that inner child a new job, life gets a lot easier and a lot less stressful.
Hmm. All right, beautiful. So, to paraphrase, one thing you said, it's consciousness is the thoughts, is becoming aware of the thoughts we have, we
Yeah.
think, and one of the key things is meditation helps to become aware of those thoughts so that we can change them, evolve, and those thoughts often come from a young age. So we get programmed, if I'm paraphrasing, we get programmed, we
Yes.
program our thoughts at a very young age, and then becoming more conscious, aware of that program will allow us to deprogram ourselves and to
Exactly.
evolve, right?
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
now, here's another follow-up question. That programming, it's because it starts at such a young age, we are so skillful in running that program.
Yes.
We have reaffirmed, practiced that program and run that program for decades, right? And
Yes.
then to change it, I see different types of opinions, perspectives on it. Some people say you can change decades of program in a day like that, right?
Mhm.
Others say you it took it, you it's the programming is so prevalent and permanent that you might get better at it, but it never really goes away. And then there's the other way where it's go like do it gradually. What's your take and perspective on that? Can it is it there to stay and it never really goes away? Constantly unlearning or reprogramming it. Can it be done in a day, or do you believe in a gradual process? So a bunch of questions
I would
there.
say all of the above. Uh, because there are exercises you do, like giving your inner child a new job description is a really powerful exercise, right? Like you've got to get your inner child understanding that it's no longer in charge of ringing the alarm bell. It's now in charge of fun and play and cheering you on, right? I actually have a name for my inner child. I call her Little Tessie because that was one of my favorite childhood nicknames, right? And I talk to her often to stay on top of that, right? So there are exercises you could do that blow through it pretty rapidly, right? That said, life throws new challenges, life throws bigger games at us, right? And often when we significantly up the game, that old programming tries to come back. Like it just happens. Or we get not diligent about noticing our thoughts, and then things start to creep in. Or it creeps in a side door from unconscious bias, right? Unconscious bias is something that's getting talked a lot about now in popular media. Like you're actually seeing Hollywood shows talking about unconscious bias. But unconscious bias is just things that reinforce that inner dialogue, or reinforce our way of being, or give us a set of beliefs that aren't necessarily true. Like in North America, for example, everybody thinks Latin America is drug dealers and really, really poor, right? And then you come down here and you travel around, it's like, what? This isn't what gets paid in portrayed in movies. Like, where did I have all this bias? And now, like, I've been to a number of countries in Latin America, and I still realize I have an unconscious bias that the ones I haven't been to, like Nicaragua and Panama, oh, well, the drug dealers must all be in those countries. Those must be the really unsafe countries, right? And I realized, wait a second. If it wasn't true for Costa Rica, and it wasn't true for Mexico or Guatemala, and it wasn't true for Colombia, like, why would it be true in those countries? Do you know what I mean? That there aren't good people there and you're unsafe everywhere you turn, right? And it's making me realize, no, we pick up a lot of unconscious bias. And I don't believe there's like any kind of conspiracy for movie makers or television makers to perpetuate unconscious bias. They're just bringing their own unconscious bias into the work they're doing, right? And it perpetuated in this planet. So the more conscious you get about noticing the way you think, the more you not only see, I've got inner dialogue, but I also have unconscious bias that could creep up everywhere. And you're never done. Like there's never a point at which you can say, oh, I've dealt with mine. Oh, I'm good. But there are exercises you can do where you can really tackle parts of it that are major barriers for you, that will actually disappear those fairly rapidly, right? But I don't believe there's any person on this planet who's done, like whose work is complete and there will never be anything that ever trips them up again. Maybe Jesus, I don't know, maybe Buddha. But I think for the most part, even Jesus or Buddha would have said that they were still on a path to inquiry and learning, you know.
I love that. Now, few things. Well, you said no one alive is done. You believe, and I agree. I believe that as well. Because when we done, then we also done with the physical body, and we go on, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Then, unconscious bias, the picture Hollywood paints, and I love that you mentioned. It's not you don't believe that it's a certain conspiracy that people want to create a certain picture or certain bias. It's that they are just portraying their own unconscious biases
Exactly.
into their art form. Now, oh, you've had that culture shock, etc., that experience of, oh wow, and that awakening.
Yeah.
And one thing I love what you said is that it's not necessarily, well, you can clear all of that stuff, but it's sometimes, if when we lose focus, lose some awareness, they kind of try to get to sneak back, try to go back in the back door, sneak back in. So it's
Mhm.
not that, it's maybe not the same old program, but it's just, well, the same but a new one that got in again. So we're
Yeah. Or
constantly
a
clearing
different
that.
version of the old one you thought you dealt with,
A
you know?
different flavor. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, that distinction I believe is so important because that's so different. Like a different flavor is coming in the door right now, and I get to play with this versus, oh, I will never be done with this. There's so much. I'm doomed. I'm programmed since I was 2, and that's just who I am, and I just have to deal with it. Whilst when we look at it as it's new things coming in, different flavors, to me that creates a different experience in how we interact with those biases,
Yeah.
programming, thoughts. Cool.
Absolutely. You know, it's fascinating, this journey we're on as human beings, right? And it wouldn't actually be that fun if we didn't have challenges when you think about it, right? And most of our challenges originate in our own mind. Isn't that a fascinating distinction, right? And when you start to realize that so much more is possible for your life, just dealing with those inner challenges one at a time.
I love what you just said because first, that part that makes life so fun is challenge. So for from a story perspective, without conflict, without challenge, there's no story. There's just a narrative and some facts. And
Yeah.
so that's one. So I challenge in life and story is such makes it more fun, exciting. And the other is also how I relate that to stories is that, well, one challenge at a time. Now we have this one, now on to the next one. Also with story, we can't focus on too many challenges or conflicts at the same time because then it becomes all chaos and it's overwhelming and there's no thread. So before we continue on, I you mentioned the give your inner child a new job, right? Or job description.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Where how can people, if our people are interested in, how can they find out, where can they get in touch, where can they dive into and play and start giving their inner child a new job description?
You know, that's an exercise we do a lot in the Evolutionary Business Council. So feel free to come check us out if you want to go to ebcouncil.com if you feel like you might be a fit for our organization, or it a fit for you rather. Um, it's actually a really simple exercise though, and I can walk people through it in 1 minute. You know, do lots of journaling around this, actually do lots of journaling. But the idea is to actually just find a quiet space, go into more of a meditative state, connect with that part of you that's still 2 years old, like you know, that remembrance you have inside of you of the 2-year-old version of you. I like to ask people to give their inner child a nickname, an empowering nickname, right? Like find either find an empowering nickname from your childhood or use the name of your favorite childhood superhero, one of those two things, right? And then actually have a conversation. You can do it through journaling or you can just do it through speaking in your mind, but actually have a conversation with your inner child to say, okay, thanks for getting me here to adulthood, but we're all grown up now. So I don't need you to be the one to ring the alarm bell all the time. You don't have to do that anymore, right? I got this. As an adult, I'm now going to be the one making the decisions. Your job now is just to cheer me on and remind me to have fun. That's your job, right? So now you've got a different conversation going on with that inner child. Now you might have to remind them, like in order for it to stick. And I would keep doing some journaling, like notice what was coming up. You might even write little love letters at night before you go to bed to your inner child, like notice what inner dialogue came up that day, and write a little letter to the inner child reminding them that it's not their job. You know, it's okay, you got it, they don't have to keep ringing the alarm bell, right? And just gently keep repeating that, because you want to fall in love with your inner child. You don't want to get rid of it. Like, you don't want to kill off your ego. There are people who teach that, kill off your ego. That's like committing murder on your inner child. Like, that's not a gentle thing to do to yourself. Our ego is the source of our personality, and it's part of what makes us wonderful. We just don't want the ego driving the bus. We don't want a 2-year-old driving the bus, right? But the 2-year-old could come along for the ride and be what makes us laugh and what makes us smile and keeps life awesome.
Oh, nice. Like you talking about killing off the ego reminds me of a book that's titled "Your Ego Is the Enemy." Just that title, I don't even open it, but
Yeah.
I love the picture you painted just now. A 2-year-old driving the bus and pushing the alarm. I see a little 2-year-old going like, "Ooh, look at
Yeah.
this button," and it goes meow meow.
Yeah, exactly. Let me open the doors while I'm at 60 kilometers an hour. Like, you just don't want that
Oh yeah.
happening, right? But that is a bus. Like, that's your personality is what's wonderful about you, you
Yeah,
know?
I agree. Beautiful. Now, again, the website was ebcouncil.com.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So for people who want to check that out, they can find it at ebcouncil.com. And I want to transition into something else about the big family, the big kids, the big family, 8 siblings, cousins. But before we do, you mentioned how it's a very simple process. Get into like talking to the inner child, giving it a new job description. It can be journaling, it could be like meditation. I'll share one experience. I have done that 3 different ways. The first time I did it, it was in a coaching session, and that coach, she held space for me to soothe the inner child. That's the first time. The other times I've journaled and wrote like a conversation letter. And with one time, it was 5 a.m. I decided to go for a walk. I took my phone and I recorded speaking to my inner child until I had nothing to say. And there was like, at one point, there's like 5 minutes of silence, and I'm mumbling to myself and I'm walking. So, I have done those 3 different modalities, and I love that you just shared that it can be done in different ways. And I also love your nickname for your inner child, Little Tessie. Mine is very similar. Mine is Little Miro. That's
Miro, I love
yeah,
it. I have a
yeah.
feeling Miro and Tessie will be friends. Beautiful. You got to come
Uh,
visit us in Costa Rica.
yeah. Now it's
Yeah.
I'm even more excited to come to Costa Rica and
Yeah.
visit. Yeah. All right.
Beautiful.
Now, wow. So you had 8 brothers, 8 brothers and sisters. So 8 siblings. You were one of 9.
Yes, correct.
Oh
The
wow.
youngest of 9. Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
just your mom, your mom and dad, right? And then
Yeah.
going to the movies with grandma, which is a big deal, and grandma's taking all the grandkids to the movies. How big of a party is that?
Yeah. Yeah. It was one of the most traumatic experiences of my childhood, sitting home alone with my mom while everybody else was out at the party. But actually, when I really look back at the real situation, it was actually a really special afternoon with my mother too. So,
Mm.
it's funny, like, they say you can't pick your family. I'm sure somewhere in the ether world, I picked my family because I had such amazing parents. A lot of what I know about leadership and influence, I actually learned from my mom and dad. Um, they had things that I now teach as axioms of leadership, and so it's kind of neat. Like what I was saying about, never interrupt a child who's being awesome at something you want them to do. I've taken that as a principle for how we run the Evolutionary Business Council, because we're actually a member-led organization. Like the members volunteer and lead all our events and stuff like that. And so when they're being awesome, I'm like, I get out of the way, you know, because and I remember my mom when I'm doing that. It's like I don't need to get in and meddle when other people are exceeding my expectations and doing wonderful things. Then they don't need me. Stand aside. I think that's one of the best traits a leader can have, to know when to stand aside and let others step up.
Beautiful. Tying back into creating
Yeah,
space for others to be who they are and step up into their
yeah.
role. Now, this is one of the reasons why I am so passionate about story and legacy. For me, I had a mom who was very hands on present, teaching me things that are that influenced me from a young age still today and kind of shaped me into who I am. And one of the things is she taught me is everything you learn in life is yours to keep.
Mm.
Everything you learn in life is yours to
Beautiful.
keep. So that's one of the things. And my from my dad, it was the complete opposite. He was so like mentally absent. He was physically there, but he would not want to hold a conversation. He would not want to give his opinion often. The benefit of that is him not being in my space the whole time. It gave me that freedom to fully be who I was meant to be, who I was. I had that
Beautiful.
full acceptance. Even when he would not agree, he would not tell me. He would tell my mom, but he would
Yeah.
not tell me. So from my dad, I was always lacking that wisdom of his life to pass it on. And from my mom, I got it kind of in overdoses. And I find that
Nice.
so important to take those lessons, integrate them, learn from them, evolve from them, and then have your new lessons and keep passing that on so that the next generation builds on a even deeper foundation and evolves even further. So I'm curious, how about your dad? What are some of the things you've learned from him? Was it through the way he was, or was it also through some of the things he said?
Actually, that's a really beautiful distinction. Truly both, you know. Um, my dad was a really incredible man and yet incredibly private, you know. Like there were things about my dad I didn't learn until I was well into adulthood. Like my dad was fluently bilingual in French and none of his children knew it. Like he raised us all English, right? And we're like, what? Dad, we could have been fluently bilingual if you had spoke French to us as kids. Like, what were you thinking? You know? And but like that was just him finding his way because he really felt like we would do better in the English speaking world and he wanted us to be raised English, right? And so like there were some things I look back on and I think, Dad, what were you thinking? But there were other things. Like one of the most profound things I learned from my dad is very little is really an emergency. You know, because we'd be as kids, we're like, Dad, and he'd be like, take a breath. Is the house burning down? You know, like he'd say stuff like that, right? Like, is the house burning down? You know, and it's funny, but a lot of that energy of like we can take a deep breath and assess the situation has really served me as the leadership of an organization full of leaders, because a lot of people will come back and are like, we got to do this, we got to do that, like the world needs saving, we got to get out there and do this, right? Which is awesome. Like it's beautiful energy that people really want to get out there and have impact. Like let's take on racism and let's take on consciousness and you know, let's build a sustainable community in Costa Rica, which by the way we're doing here, right? But it doesn't have to be an emergency, because it's very easy to get yourself all stressed out, like why isn't this going faster? And like when you can just surrender and take a deep breath and let things unfold at the pace they're meant to unfold, often you find that, you know, you make way bigger progress than you ever thought was possible, right? There's a quote and I can't remember who said it. I think it might have been Jacqueline Green who said it, which is, we often overestimate what we can do in the short run, but way underestimate what we can achieve in the long run. And that has been very true for my life. And I think my dad was my biggest role model of that, you know, where he would be like, calm down. No, no, no. What's the big picture here? And then he'd get us there. You know, it was really quite cool to watch who he was as a leader. He used to be a top administrator for an organization in the town we grew up in. So he had a lot of leadership skills that I got to watch in action.
Beautiful. I love that. Like, hey, no drama. Where's the fire? No drama. And
Yeah.
that reminds me of like my mom. She's from Colombia. She loves
Mhm.
telenovelas, and the telenovelas, they're all about drama. I
Yeah.
know, mijo.
Yeah.
So those are some things that I had to unlearn. No drama. Where's the
Yeah.
fire, right? Or
Yeah. That's
oh,
our inner
cool.
dialogue, right? That's the little inner child going, it's gotta get done now. Right? But in fact, you know, from a standpoint of higher consciousness, it's like, well, it might be important, but it doesn't necessarily need to get done this very minute. Like nothing bad is going to happen if it doesn't, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No fires, all good. No drama.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow. So those were some things that you modeled for, and you he was bilingual in French, and you only later learned about
Uh-huh.
that. Like, how can you keep that a secret? Not
I
speaking
know.
French for how many decades in
Yeah.
front of your kids?
Yeah, I know. In fact, the other thing we learned about my dad many, many years later, he was a concert level pianist. And I never heard him play piano. It was like when he decided he was done with something, he was done with it. And then he'd move on to the next thing in his life, right? So it's just fascinating. He made sure we all learned piano as kids, but he never played in front of us. And it was like, oh, that's kind of fascinating. But in a way, I'm a little bit like him in that I love to master things and then move on.
Mm.
And when I look back over my life, there's been many things I've mastered and then I put it aside. And then often there becomes a point in my life where I want to pick it up again. But it's kind of neat. All of these things start to make sense later in my life. My knowledge of them, my mastery of them suddenly starts to weave in and out. And I see my dad did that a lot too. He would master things and then set them aside. And then over the course of his life, many of these things would weave back together. It was really neat to watch.
Oh, beautiful. I'm curious, what's one of the things that you've mastered that you're no longer, that you've moved on from?
Well, actually, my original university training was as a biologist, believe it or not. And in the very early years of my career, I worked in biology, and then I moved over into like management systems and then business management systems. Well, I started with environmental management systems, but then I gained a lot of expertise in business because of where my career as a biologist moved me. And then, ended up learning a lot about influence, which has always been a fascination for me, right? But after the first few years of my career, I really stopped working as a biologist after about 5 years in. But now it's come back full circle because a group of us from the Evolutionary Business Council decided it would be really fun to create a conscious, sustainable community here in Costa Rica. And it's like, wow, all that knowledge and early training as a biologist is really coming to bear in terms of everything, all the decisions we're making and everything we're doing down here. It's helping really to inform, the way we're choosing to live and how we're establishing everything. So it's, similar to how my dad did it. It's like, oh, there's stuff that's weaving back in that, becomes a real part of the tapestry of my life.
Oh, beautiful. Now I'm curious in, okay, now your biology background is very relevant today for the local community you're building out. You've mentioned that before previously. Tell us more about that. What's the idea? What's the concept? Where did it originate? And what's the vision for that local community in
Yeah.
Costa Rica?
Our community is called Vista Mundo, which means view of the world, because it's a lot of big level thinkers. So it's a play on words because we have stunning views of the Guanacaste Peninsula and the West Coast, but we're also worldview thinkers who are moving here. And it's really a passion project. Like my main business is the Evolutionary Business Council. This is more let's just see what unfolds, right? So it's a group of friends from the Evolutionary Business Council, and we found a developer to work with us. We're actually the first land development in Costa Rica where you can buy land with Bitcoin, because I really believe in digital currency as a beautiful evolution on this planet that is starting to right the disparity between what we would define as the first world and the third world. Like it's creating a new rule book. We need a new rule book right now. We got to stop playing by the rules that were set up under a caste system, hundreds of years old, that has this, unconscious bias planetary wide that certain people are just meant to be at a lower economic status, and we in North America and Europe are meant to be higher. And like, please don't think I believe that. I'm acknowledging it as a dominant unconscious belief system that operates on this planet that is really inappropriate and unethical, right? And cryptocurrency is really getting at that, right? So we're a crypto friendly, conscious, sustainable community here in Costa Rica, and we're just having a lot of fun. We're building a food forest and like planting food trees in and around all the buildings. We've got a retreat center built so people can do retreats here. So if you want to find out about that, you can come to vistamundo.info.
Beautiful. All right. Vista Mundo. Okay, wow. I'm so excited about that and see how that unfolds. And what I
Yeah, you
love
got to come
about,
visit us.
yeah, no, definitely. So what I love about um, your approach to this passion project, it really shows and illustrates to something you said earlier about letting things unfold on their own time without having that force, that alarm bell, that drama. It has to be done yesterday, but
Yeah.
just let things unfold the way they should naturally. And you're really applying. I see you're really applying that with Vista Mundo. Vista Mundo. Oh, I love that. How is your Spanish coming along?
Muy bien. Mi
Muy bien.
comprensión es no bueno, pero I can usually string together a few sentences. So I'm struggling with the Costa Rican accent still. So I can usually be understood, but then understanding is still a challenge for me. So I got to watch more TV and movies to get that down. But
Telenovelas, no
yeah,
drama.
telenovelas. That's right. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. The
Uh,
Costa Ricans have a pretty unique accent, which I'm still struggling with. Even more challenging for me is the Nicaraguan accent, and there's a lot of Nicaraguans here, so I'm still like feeling my way through that. But we're getting there. I do Spanish classes every week, so
nice, nice.
yeah.
That's the complexity of Spanish because sometimes even within a country, I remember that you have these smaller towns and villages where they have their own lingo and slang that they don't understand
Yeah.
in not just the rest of the Spanish speaking community, not even within the country you would understand that. So there's even
Yeah.
a song that's called Que difícil es hablar el español porque todo lo que dice tiene otra definición. And then they go really into depth and compare some words. And
Mm.
only when you're at a certain level, you can really appreciate the humor and the nuances in that. Even my Spanish is not at that level
Yeah.
to really comprehend that. But oh,
Yeah.
wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, we're no different in English, right? There's so many different accents in English. I mean,
Mm.
there's English accents I can't even understand, and I'm a native English speaker. Like in Canada, Newfoundlanders, well, like if they're from the city, it's not bad. But if they're from Newfoundland and in the country, like a lot of native English speakers can't understand half of what they're saying because they use such dominant colloquial expressions that like you don't know what they mean, and then the accent's very thick, you know. And there's regions of Britain that are like that too. It's like just don't understand that accent. So it's kind of fascinating how language evolves. That's for sure.
Yeah, so true, so true. All right, cool. Then, oh, this is a whole lot of fun, and just we can go into even more topics like build planting fruit trees around the buildings in that community. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
exciting. So, to wrap up, we talked about a whole lot of different things. We talked about one of your biggest challenges you faced and really stepping up into that leadership role and answering that call, like your soul's purpose. And we also dove a bit into holding space and the inner child work and what that is, and it's constant growing. And one of the things I believe is, and my intention for the show is to really also from those personal experiences extract the life wisdom, life knowledge for future generations. So for people today, tomorrow, 1,000 years from now, what message would you like to share with them?
I would say give yourself permission to take action on your dreams. Your outrageous, ridiculous dreams to really make a difference in this world, most especially. Because until you actually step into your dreams and take action on them, you're really just dreaming, you know? So be outrageous and just lean in and move forward because life is a whole lot sweeter on the other side.
Beautiful. Give yourself permission on your outrageous, ridiculous dreams. I love that. Teresa, thank you. So this was Story Legacy at Ramiro.me. Teresa, we're gonna end on a kapow. Kapow is a little celebration move. It means breakthrough, it means growth, it's just fun. So I'm gonna say, you know how now, and then together we say kapow. Are you ready?
I love it. Yes.
You know how now? Kapow!
Kapow!
All right, thank you.
Oh.
So